Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 145 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. Here, I'm down in the bunker. I noticed that just looking at myself, I'm dressed a little more casually than you are, Dave, but you came down the stairs in a suit.
Yeah.
What's going on over there?
Well, I would say, first of all, that you are sartorially indifferent.
Okay.
Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay. Vomitorium South here in the bunker. Yes, I'm wearing the makings of a suit.
Yes.
And the coat, actually, true story, I bought at a thrift store.
Okay.
And for the sake of this setup, we'll say it was a three-piece suit.
All right.
And it had a coat, it had matching pants, and then it had like a button-up vest, right? Do you ever wear one of those?
I have never worn a three-piece suit.
Okay.
Yes.
I haven't either, but for the sake of the setup. And I'm wearing this suit, and I'm starting to think, is this really a good purchase? Was this worth my money? Mm-hmm. Should I have, it's just thrift store, but still I laid out some cash for this.
Of course.
And then I'm rummaging around in the pocket of the vest.
Yeah.
And I find a little tin of Altoids.
Okay, that's weird.
You know what those are, right?
Yeah, it's a strong breath mint.
Yes. And I thought, should I eat a mint from a suit bought at the
thrift store? Yeah.
So yes is the answer. And I popped one in, and it was really quite good. And after thinking about it a little while, I came to the realization, this suit and all of its parts, these were really good investments.
Oh, man.
Should we just cancel the rest of the episode?
No, we're keeping it. We're keeping it.
Investments.
I got you.
Yeah, okay.
I got you. Well done, sir.
Thanks. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
So I am over this long illness that was plaguing me. So I think I'm about 85% now.
You've been through the desert on a horse with no name,
that's right.
so to speak.
So to speak, exactly right. And you're feeling okay?
Yeah, it feels good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name.
It's true, exactly.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's been a challenging week in some ways, not dissimilar to the previous one. Last week, talking to Gary Schmidt, that was really nice.
It was.
Almost therapeutic in a sense. He talked to a great wordsmith.
Yeah.
Like that man.
Yeah.
So that was good. And we have a surprising and exciting episode today. Jeff, what's on tap?
We have Stanley Lombardo.
Wait a minute. Who?
The great translator, Stanley Lombardo, whose works we have used, that we've plugged.
Peddled.
He publishes with Hackett Publishing, one of our sponsors. Mm-hmm. But the list of his works it's incredible.
It is, really.
Right.
And we're going to get to that soon, but first we have, what would you call this? A shout out? Not really.
What would you call this?
I would call this Ron Henley's attempt to become a regular feature on the podcast.
He is kind of worming his way in.
He is,
right?
yeah.
Right, yeah.
But our Australian correspondent, he's endearing.
He is endearing.
So what does he say?
Yeah, so Ron Henley from Australia, he says to us, hope you are thriving. He says, I think I have now completed my list, 2,443 words. What is he talking about?
Well, if I remember in our correspondence, Ron has put together a list of all of the English words, or maybe the interesting ones, that come from Latin in order to convince his students that, hey, this is relevant. It was either that or beat a drum in the classroom all the time.
Right.
And so he has completed his list of 2,443 words.
Okay.
I wanted to tell Ron, they have dictionaries for these things, right?
Right.
But I don't want to spoil his fun.
No.
And he says many students are delivering impressive creations such as...
And so these are students that are doing short paragraphs using these words.
That's right. He gives them an assignment. Use some of these words and compose a paragraph so you can actually use your Latin knowledge in composing an English paragraph.
Okay, I think this is where you were saying you didn't want to spoil Ron's fun, but I think this is where Ron is having fun.
Okay, all right. Why don't you read that one?
All right, so this is Clara's Chaos by Hazel. Clara thinks her classes were too hard for her, and she heard a whisper, "Come here." She wasn't confident at first because they were a complete stranger, and with Corona going around, she was hesitant, but then she gave in and went in, and it was her friend Camilla from her history classes.
Nice.
You want to pick it up there?
Yes. Camilla said, "Do you want to test out my car and skip school?" Clara was in complete shock because Camilla was the type of character where other people's parents would compare her to others because she would always care about her grades. Clara thought it would sound fun, but when Camilla was driving her car, she got into a car crash and Clara was in a coma.
Well, that took a dark turn. I did not see that coming.
You didn't see the oncoming car?
No, I did not. Just like Camilla.
And then just at the end.
Boy.
Wow.
And he leaves us hanging.
Yeah,
I hope Clara's okay.
Well, this is all fiction.
I know.
Right. This is all fiction. Like something in, one of Gary's stories.
Exactly.
I have to say, nicely done, Heisel. Nice composition. Thank you, Ron. You keep at it, Ron. Maybe you'll become a regular feature on the podcast.
Absolutely. Right.
It's at least possible.
Yeah. So, Dave, should we get around to today's main event?
Absolutely. Let's welcome Stanley Lombardo to the program. Excellent. Well, welcome to the show. Dr. Lombardo, how do you want us to refer to you? What's your preferred moniker?
Stan.
Okay.
All right. Excellent.
It's a great pleasure finally to meet you. We are longtime admirers of your enormous body of work, aren't we, Jeff?
Yes, we are. Definitely. Yeah. I want to say from the get-go is, Stan, that I've used your translation of the Odyssey in my mythology classes for years, and it is I can't tell you how many times I've had students who are intimidated by just kind of the length of the book, or they had a bad experience with the Odyssey in high school, and time and time again they say this is great. This makes sense to me. I love this. I want to keep reading. And it is owed to your wonderful translation.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful to hear.
Yes.
That's what it's all about for me, is, delivering to students, the main audience. Adults are welcome too. So,
So as we get started today, we have a number of questions, and we hope that the conversation will be free-flowing, wide-ranging, and you're free to interrupt us if we're talking too much and just take it in a direction that you'd like.
Okay.
We'd like to start out with your general biography, and the reason is I think that a lot of readers, a lot of students, as Jeff was just saying, they admire the work and they wonder what goes into making the kind of person that can do this kind of intellectual work.
Okay. Well, I born and grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. Attended Catholic schools, Sisters of Christian Charity for 9 years, Christian Brothers for 4 years, and Jesuit priests for another 4 years. And I think that was a pretty strong influence, actually. The Jesuits, being intellectuals,
right,
contributed more to my, I think, intellectual formation than the nuns or the Christian Brothers. God bless their souls, though. They were really wonderful. And I don't know, how to evaluate that as,
sure,
forming my character, but I know it was considerable. It was when I was in high school that I started to get interested in poetry in a serious way, writing my own poetry.
Okay.
I did one translation when I was in high school, one of the Fables of Phaedrus. The cricket, having sung her song the summer long, found her stores a little low, and on it goes. And then nothing for years and years. When I was in graduate school at the University of Texas, is when I really began to be formed as a poet. And for me, the link is an absolute, a performer. So I came to realize that all of ancient poetry was performative. You never sat down and read. Somebody's reading to you.
Right.
And somebody who's pretty good, too, and making it come to life. So from the very beginning, I have been trying to translate for performance. And habitually knocking out a couple of pages and then reading them out loud and then revising on the basis of how they read out loud. And that's still what I do.
Okay. So a couple of follow-up questions, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you remember your first encounter with Latin in elementary school?
Yes, Latin, yes, because I was an altar boy.
Sure.
For quite a few years. I think this must have been about 8 years. And the Mass was in Latin. And it just poured into my ears. And I don't remember quite how, but I began to understand it, I guess, through repetition and seeing translations maybe side by side with the Latin. I don't have a good memory of that, but I remember absorbing the Latin, the sound of it, the weight of the words. And that went on for, I guess I was an altar boy for 6 years. And, not only Mass, but, the funerals and the Latin at funerals and the occasional wedding even. And that's how I developed a feel for Latin, I suppose. And then university, after all of that Latin, in church, I decided to major in classics, Latin and Greek. The first Greek course was Homeric Greek. And that's an excellent way to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah. By my junior year in college, I was reading Homer in Greek and moving on to some other authors and Virgil in Latin. But I didn't really start translating then, not in any kind of serious way. And that didn't happen until I was in graduate school.
So in your early experience in your Greek and Latin classes, were you having that performative itch being scratched? Was there lots of recitation, or was it more just kind of silent reading and translation?
Well, it became recitation. And what I was doing actually was imitating recordings in English that I had been, listening to actually for years. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, for instance, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And that's what developed my notion of all of this as performance at a fairly early stage. And so when I really began to study Latin and recite it, it was natural for me to think of it as performance.
Yes.
So that goes way back, in my history. And then, of course, translating it, I try to translate for performance. And if it doesn't work when I read it out loud, I know I have to revise.
Excellent. Yeah. So I've been telling students, and this may be an incorrect notion, I would be glad to be corrected on this, that one of the reasons why the Greco-Roman corpus has had such longevity is because of the oral nature. In other words, the ear is far less forgiving and far more discerning than the eye.
Yeah.
So I think because it was intended to be performed, that gives the literature a certain kind of immediacy that's hard to reproduce.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You were always listening to this in antiquity, and the first record that we have of someone sight reading is Ambrose. You probably know that story.
Yeah,
and we're well into AD by that time. So I've always been aware of that, and that's how I've always worked.
So who is your audience now? When you say you translate a couple pages and then you read a couple of them out loud?
I'm my only audience when I'm composing.
Well, then you're an excellent critic as well as composer, because it's very hard for a person to accurately assess themselves. But I think you do, because the product is good.
Yeah.
What I have in my ears is a professor I had in graduate school, Gareth Morgan, who was Welsh, and who read Greek, especially Latin too, but he preferred Greek out loud, just more beautifully than I could ever imagine. So it seems like I'm always trying to draw Gareth's voice, So there's always a voice to be heard, and of course it gets printed out, but I don't feel that it's come to life until it's been performed. And Hackett, my publisher, wanted to do audiobooks of everything of mine they'd published. But they felt in order to do that and make it feasible, they would have to have the rights to Iliad and audio rights, Iliad and Odyssey. They were recorded a long time ago by this very wealthy couple who just, I don't know, I really don't know what was their motive, but they wanted it done. And the recording was done at a first-class studio in Las Vegas. And, recorded the entire Iliad and Odyssey in 10 days.
This was your translation, right?
This is my translation.
Yes.
And for me, that was, the realization. This is what I'm translating for, is for performance. And those recordings are still available on Kindle. I don't know how they're selling, but Hackett felt that they could not publish all the rest of my stuff without having the Iliad and Odyssey. And the people who have the copyright refuse to sell or negotiate in any way. And there's nothing I can do about that, I suppose. But that would be the ultimate consummation for me.
Right. Yeah. But it looks like you've taken your revenge by translating. I'm looking at your bibliography. More than 15 different great works of a dazzling variety, like Parmenides and Empedocles. So this is pre-Socratic philosophy. And then you have, some of the classical works we've mentioned, plus Gilgamesh, the Bhagavad Gita, just an incredibly broad survey. Zen Source Book with Stephen Addis and Judith Reutemann. It's really impressive.
Yeah. The Gilgamesh came about in an interesting way. My editor at Hackett, Brian Rack, I was visiting him in Boston, and he took me out to a very fancy restaurant. And about halfway through the second bottle of wine, he said, we'd really like for you to translate the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I said, well, I don't know the language, And he said, well, how long would it take for you to learn it? I said, God, I don't know.
So is it Akkadian or Sumer?
It's Akkadian, and I found somewhere, I can't remember where, but a interlinear word-for-word translation that some graduate students in some program, I forget where now, had done decades ago. And using that, and, I know some Hebrew.
Sure.
And Semitic is Semitic, as it turns out, so I can make sense of it. And so I agreed to do it. And that's really an outlier. Well, not completely, because the Bhagavad Gita, Sanskrit, is something well, it's Sanskrit, so it's Indo-European, so, kind of know what's going on. But I found an edition that had a literal word-for-word interlinear translation. And I could be sure I got the word right. And the Tao Te Ching I did with Stephen Addis, who's very proficient. He died a few years ago. He was brilliant and wonderful to work with. And so I just relied on him. And, the first line of the Tao Te Ching is Tao Ka Tao Fei Chang Tao, which is Tao called Tao is not true Tao. And we didn't like the way that sounded, so we just settled on Tao called Tao is not Tao.
Jeff, is this the first time Mandarin has been spoken? I think it's Mandarin, right? Or is it Cantonese? But
well, it's so long ago.
That's fine. Right. We wouldn't know the difference. I wouldn't know the difference.
I don't know that we would.
First time spoken on our podcast?
Yes. Yeah, indeed.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stan, I have a kind of a technical question for you. So in my myth class, I've also used your translation of the Iliad. And so this is a course in translation when the students don't know any Greek. But I try to impress upon them. I'll give them a little taste of the dactylic hexameter. And I talk about the first word of the Iliad, Manen, and kind of rage is kind of as a watchword for kind of understanding the whole work. And then I was delighted to open your translation where you begin the Iliad with rage, colon, and then you follow it. And so I translate these things with an ear towards performance, definitely. Yeah. But it's also clear that you're attuned to the importance of word order in the Greek. And so I was kind of wondering, how do you thread that needle between kind of having something that's readable, that's performable, but also kind of you're also trying to kind of do what Homer's doing at the same time?
Well, you've described what my intentions are.
Yeah.
And how do I thread that needle? With a very good magnifying glass. You have to be really careful. all the way. If you're too attached to it, then nothing is going to work. So it's always some kind of compromise. And you're correct in saying that, and observing that I want the Greek text to somehow be transformed into English.
Yes.
In a recognizable sort of way. Not that most of the readers would have no way of seeing that, but people such as you, would look to that. And so whatever you see, when I'm successful at it is certainly deliberate. And in each case, I think I go as far as I can, without moving into, some kind of serious illegibility.
Yeah.
That's always been with me in everything I've translated. And my instinct is that it's all for the better to work that way rather than simply be completely free.
Right.
And,
Yes.
as long as it works in English, it's fine.
So one of the descriptors of your translation style is that it is more vernacular. You must have thought at some length about different theories of translation and approaches to translation. I'm wondering when you, maybe very early on, it sounds like, but when did you decide upon a kind of approach? This is what I want to do. And then how did you develop consistency with that approach?
Okay. Well, one of my early influences when I was in graduate school was listening to Christopher Logue's recitation of Book 16 of the Iliad. Brilliant performance. And I was completely taken by it. So I got the text and I compared it to the Greek and kind of saw what Logue was doing, which is, let's say, being as free as he could while remaining committed to the text. And that's the tension.
Okay.
Right. So I hope that gives you some idea of, well, first of all, how I came to this. And it really was, if you can find that recording, it's well worth listening to. It's just brilliant. Very free translation, but it honors the Greek text. He's not just making things up.
Is that Death of Patroclus, Book 16? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, Sarpedon.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Patroclea, it's sometimes called, that book. Yeah.
His Aristeia.
Stan, when you're working on translation, do you? So you kind of implied from what you were just saying. You saw what Christopher was doing with it. Like, say if you're translating the Odyssey or the Iliad, do you ever pause and say, well, you're kind of wrestling with a line, and you want to say, well, what did Lattimore do with this? Or do you try to stay away from previous translations?
I try to stay completely away from previous translations. And it's easy to do. Just don't look at them.
Right.
Yeah. It would be very difficult with something like the Bible because of the prominence of the King James. But other than maybe Alexander Pope, I can't think of someone whose renditions are so prominent as to still be resident in people's minds. But
yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah.
I found that one of the problems that my students ran into is that so many of them, if they had some mythology in high school, they were given the Samuel Butler translation.
Yes.
From 1900, and almost to a student, it was a roadblock. They did not like it.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yes. And that's why your translations are such a breath of fresh air when they come from something like that.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It's an argument against one of many arguments, I would say, against archaism or excessive archaism.
Yeah.
But
so. I have one more question.
Oh,
here.
sure.
So Stan, when you're approaching or you're thinking about translating a work, what brings you to a particular work? Is it do you look out there and say, this has the translation? There hasn't been a translation in a long time. The translations out there are kind of stodgy.
Jeff, he already told you it's a fancy dinner in Boston and 2 bottles.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay,
that's one way.
Yeah.
Look, if you want me to translate something, that's how you come. But I appreciate this interview. I'll do whatever you want.
But yeah, so what's the thought process when you think about, I would like to do, fill in the blank?
Well, everything that I've translated, by the time I translated, I had previously read in Greek or Latin. And I'll leave to one side I guess I read the Bhagavad Gita at some point. I don't remember, the few things that I've done that are not in Greek and Latin may be exceptions. But I was familiar with them and had taught many of them, over a kind of a long career teaching. But what was it, or what is it? I hope I'm not completely done. I think I may be, though. We'll talk about that later. One thing that I feel that I'm doing, maybe a little narcissistically, is honoring the text and honoring the tradition and trying to bring it alive now in our language. So it's kind of an homage. And so I never feel that I own a work. Somehow I come into contact with it. I don't know how to explain this somehow. For instance, the Heroides, Ovid's Heroides, which is in press now. I had some kind of brushing acquaintance with it, but for some reason, I just translated the first. I guess there are 21 of them. The first one is
it Penelope to Ulysses?
Penelope to Ulysses. Penelope to Ulysses. Don't write back. Just get yourself home. Okay, there's a voice there. I can make this come alive. If I feel I can make it come alive for performance, I go ahead. If I can't make it come alive for performance, I'm not going to do it. So, that's really what it comes down to. If I can hear a voice, and I think I can make that voice come alive in English performance, then I'm motivated to do it. And that's actually really been true of everything that I've translated.
So there's no prose on, or not much prose, I guess, and no
is
Cicero.
Is there any prose? I don't remember.
I guess
Cicero. I've translated some Plato for something.
Okay.
Some anthology, I forget what. And actually, I don't even remember what it was, to tell you the truth.
But oratory has no appeal to you in terms of the performative value?
I'm a poet.
Okay.
I want verse.
Yeah.
I see your point, certainly, but I certainly haven't been... Cicero? No, I don't think so. Cicero translated Aratus's Phenomena.
Yes.
Into Latin, which gives you some idea of the status Aratus had.
Right.
In the ancient world. I don't think that Cicero went around translating just anything.
And quoted in the Acts of the Apostles, I think. But
I'm sorry.
I think Aratus is quoted in the Acts of the Apostles. It was.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, he was very well known. We have more manuscripts of Aratus than we have for any other author.
Oh wow!
But somehow he just fell away from.
Right. Well, depending on what happens in Herculaneum with the Villa of the Papyri, you might have another 25 years of work set out ahead of you.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that.
So I wanted to read it, maybe just one line here of Ovid's Metamorphoses in Latin, and then have Jeff read the first 4 lines of your translation from the Ovid.
Okay.
Okay, so here's just a couple lines of Ovid's Metamorphoses. In no afertanamus mutatas dicere formas corpora di coiptis namuos mutastis et illas, plus lines 3 and 4. And Jeff, maybe you could just read how Stan, I can hardly call him that, even though he told me to, how he construed those 4 lines, and then we can get some of his thoughts on this particular work.
Yes. My mind now turns to stories of bodies changed into new forms. O gods, inspire my beginnings, for you changed them too, and spin a poem that extends from the world's first origins down to my own time.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
That word,
well read. Thank you.
That word dedukata, right?
Yeah.
You translate spin a poem.
Spin. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I remember coming to that. So what am I going to do with this?
Right.
And there's some kind of metaphor there. And so I went with the metaphor.
Many of the translations are pull out, draw out, extend, things like that. But
literal translation. Yeah,
makes it flat. You know.
Yeah, you do have to make it come alive somehow. I mean, that's always been a maxim for me. You know, bring it to life, make it. Well, Ezra Pound's, you know, make it new. And make it make sense, and well, you're making it new.
Yeah.
Stan, how do you deal with like issues of meter, and you know, do you ever try to kind of, you know, mimic the ancient meter, or as in terms of making it, you know, come alive? Do you? Just how do you deal with those kinds of issues?
Well, most of the, certainly all of the epics, and that's the most part of what I've translated, is dactylic hexameter.
Right.
English doesn't do English poetry. English verse, I don't think, works very well with dactyls. Works pretty well with anapaests, though. Short, long. So I would say that what I'm doing is kind of reversing the dactylic foot, you know, if you want.
Yeah.
That's what an anapaest is. And I think if, you know, you look at any extended passage of translation of hexameter, you would see that it is, in fact, anapaestic. Not rigidly so. That would be awful, I think, you know, if you had every line anapaestic tetrameter. But that's what's in the background anyway. That's, you might say, you have a background of, you know, anapaestic tetrameter, and then you have lines coming out of that, and varying it in, you know, in different ways.
And speaking of anapaestic tetrameters, Jeff.
Yes?
It's time for the ads.
Let's do it. This episode of Odd Navseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Dave, did you use your ratio machine this morning?
Yes, I did.
I did too. So
you using my ratio machine this morning?
I snuck in. I didn't wake anybody up.
I heard something going on in the kitchen, and I thought, that's either a very large rodent.
Yeah.
I mean, very large, or it's Jeff using my ratio machine.
Exactly. So I was in there with my robe, and I thought,
that's enough.
No, I use my own ratio machine. So your family was not affected by the water boil advisory, was it?
Yeah.
It was?
No, it wasn't affected, but someone said to me just a few days ago, did you get that boil thing?
Yeah.
And I thought, what's happened? Is this like a skin lesion? I couldn't figure.
A plague?
I really was confused. No, it's you must boil your water because the Grand Rapids water treatment system overflowed again.
Some water main problem.
Right.
So, but
were you affected?
I was. And so, but it did not. It was just an extra step in enjoying the coffee from my ratio. So we
boiled it.
We boiled it, and I even just bought some jugged water that could just pour into my machine. And so I was a little worried that might be a problem, but everything worked out okay. I got my coffee this morning. It brewed it up perfectly.
Nice.
I've got the ratio 8. You have the ratio 8.
Fibonacci head?
Yep, Fibonacci head.
You got a scorch pad or a Kindle brick underneath that?
Nothing. It doesn't need that.
Okay.
So the plutonium flagon.
Now wait a minute. Is this actually made of plutonium?
No.
What's the deal?
Well, it's not, but it presents itself as such.
It's so heavy. You're saying that if you had to put some plutonium in there, and smuggle it home from the nuclear power plant, rather than it sticking to the back of your shirt,
exactly,
you could do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Exactly. So I pressed the one touch button. You got the bloom, you got the brew, and it's ready to go. Yep. And Dave, tell us about
the famous Hitchcock movie,
what the
Bloom with a Brew.
The Bloom with a Brew, exactly. Right. But we've talked at length on this podcast about the 6 and the 8. But what's coming? What's coming
is the 4.
Yes,
as easy as pods, but so much better. Ever wonder what the convenience of a Keurig really costs? With their little marsupods, right?
Yep.
A little bit of Joey in every cup. On average, $33 to $50 a pound, depending on the roaster, for mediocre coffee brewed with haste and waste at the forefront into throwaway plastic pods.
Yes. We have one of these in our office kitchen at work, and I refuse to use it.
This is a Keurig?
It's a Keurig.
And you don't use it?
No, it's just this tiny little plastic thing. And you know, coming from home, from my ratio 8, why would I even bother?
Do you glare in its direction?
I do. Exactly.
One of those?
I do. I sneer. I huff. Yeah.
Good. So the ratio 4, the first affordable and beautiful half batch pour over coffee machine. Jeff, I can't wait for this to come out because I love my 8, but I'm the only coffee drinker in my family.
Are you serious?
Yeah, absolutely. We have guests over, extended family. They like a good cup.
But your lovely wife does not?
She doesn't care for the coffee.
Okay.
Nope. But the 4 is our smallest brewer yet. An agile, sleek machine that puts out between 5 and 20 ounces of coffee per batch, enough for 1 to 2 reasonably sized cups or 1 big travel mug.
Sounds great. Excellent. So I can't wait for that to come out too. We'll make a big splash of that on the show.
Yeah, I think we'll give away a free one also.
Fantastic.
As we did with the 6.
Excellent.
So let's say, Jeff, people don't want to wait for the 4 to come out.
Right.
They say, I want to get the 6 or the big boy, the 8. What should they do?
They should go to ratiocoffee.com, RATIO coffee.com. Check out the machines. Pick the one you want, put it in the grocery satchel, and type in this coupon code, ANCO6S.
That's right. And last week, the S stood for schmizzling, I think.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, like a schmizzling cup of coffee.
Okay, yeah.
You don't care for that?
That's all right. But what does it stand for this week?
I don't know. I was going to ask you. What does it stand for this week, Jeff?
Boy, you put me on the spot. I come up dry.
Serendipitous.
That's what it is. Excellent.
Yes, this is exactly the cup of serendipitous coffee that you have been looking for. You can serendip your donut in it.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the good folks at Hackett Publishing. Actually, the whole episode is an ad for Hackett Publishing.
This is very
Jeff?
true. That's right. So Mr. Dr. Stanley Lombardo has translated, I think almost all of his works are published by Hackett.
Pretty much.
He's a long-standing relationship with them.
The Iliad with the cover that you like.
Yep, and the Odyssey, both with the photograph of Earth from the moon.
Yeah, the Iliad is the D-Day landing.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Horrors of war.
Yep. We used his Metamorphoses, which is a wonderful translation. So yeah, like you said, the whole episode today is a
promo for Hackett.
Indeed.
Because they know how to bring the best publishers to a mass market.
It's true.
The best translators to a mass market, and they do so, at exorbitant and bank-breaking prices?
No, quite the opposite.
Okay.
Yep, they are very affordable. It's a great company. They are one of these groups out there that are keeping the flame alive.
That's correct. And, supporting classics, but not just classics.
No, not just classics. All kinds of other things. We'll hear from Stan. We'll talk about translating the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
And other kind of works.
Actually, we already did.
We already talked about that?
Yeah, that was before the break.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. Don't let the secret out that not all of these are, what is the word? Diachronic?
Right.
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay. Well, at any rate, that's evidence that Hackett doesn't just do the classics,
right.
But you can find all kinds of different things. So, listener, do yourself a favor. Go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Check out their vast selection. Find what you want. Put it in the grocery cart. And then, Dave, what should they do?
They should enter this coupon code, AN2024. And this won't work at any of Hackett's competitors like Crackett Publishing.
Oh, Crackett Publishing. The worst.
Yeah.
Right.
Books entirely devoted to not severing things, but just introducing long fissures.
Long fissures? Oh, man. You wouldn't think there would be a huge market for that.
It's a huge industry, Crackett Publishing, but we're not going to go there.
No.
And the coupon won't work there, but it will work at Hackett.
Yes.
AN2024. What does that get them,
Jeff? That gets them two wonderful things. They get them 20% off your entire order, and it will get you free shipping.
Check it out.
So that's how I handle a hexameter. That's, of course, most of what I've done is originally
right.
hexameter, but I've translated, all of Horace's lyric meters and Sappho's. And there I try to write verse that's proportionate to the stanzaic forms that these poets are working with. And I want to make the stanzas somehow equivalent without, imitating the meter exactly, which certainly can be done, but I don't think it's very successful often at all.
Huh. So not only do different languages have different idioms, but clearly different languages would have different verse idioms as well.
Yeah, and so we know iambic verse is the most common in English, and anapest, it's from short to long, rather long to short.
Right.
Classical verse, classical Greek and Latin verse tends to be. Not to say that, of course, there are exceptions in choral meters, You can have just about anything. And I just let it become really free when I'm dealing with that kind of meter. And often I want to look at just how it lays out on the page. So translating stuff, that Sapphic stanza, the first 3 lines will be roughly, 11 syllables, and the last line roughly 5, and that last line will be indented the way Sapphic indentation is in both Greek and Latin. So I'm playing with it and just trying to, bring it into English while still giving some impression of what the original verse looks like and feels like.
Right.
That's how I approach it.
Okay.
Anyway.
Now, you mentioned Ezra Pound, Make It New, recently, and I also read somewhere, maybe it was the Wikipedia page, Jeff, true confession.
Yes.
That's sometimes you perform your own poetry, and you accompany yourself on the drums, like Ezra Pound did.
Right.
I'd like to hear more about that. That was an interesting fact.
Yeah, well, knowing that Ezra Pound did it kind of freed me up to do it or something, but I've never heard his, are there recordings? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I haven't heard.
I don't think there are. So I started to do, first of all, I've done a lot of performances, more than 80, coast to coast, all sorts of venues. And many other local readings as well. Very early on, I started to use a small hand drum, like a tambourine, really, and take the metal off, usually with some kind of stick also, rather than just hitting it with the finger, and it seemed to work. I had no coaching in that. And maybe it's good that I didn't, just trying to suit myself and trying to bring out the rhythms the way I'm trying to bring them out with the verse. And it really seemed to work. Audiences liked it. I was told at the studio in Las Vegas that it was too difficult for them to edit if I used a drum.
Oh.
And so they just... You had to get it absolutely right the first time, or, and so I didn't use the drum for that. I haven't actually given a reading for quite a while. Every now and then I visit a class, here at KU, and sometimes bring a drum. I miss it. I really do.
It makes me think of beat poetry of Ginsberg, Burroughs, and Kerouac. Was that kind of poetry ever an influence on you?
Yes, I read a lot of that and was aware that they sometimes use drums, but I wasn't. I don't think my own performance was influenced by what they were doing. I just sort of followed my own rhythms.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm glad I did it, and I hope to get to do it again.
What have you enjoyed most about the work of being a translator? What sticks out as this part I really, really enjoy? And then, of course, the follow-up will be, what have you found the most challenging or unpleasant?
Oh, that's kind of hard. Well, I've always liked to compose and perform verse. And first, of course, it was my own. I've continued to write my own poetry, but it's I haven't written anything for quite some time. I like the interaction with the audience. I like being on a stage and just looking out across the room. The commonality that is established. I can understand why people go into acting. It's a kind of intimacy there. A real there's a kind of meeting of minds, of heart minds. I really feel a connection. I don't know what else to say about it.
How about the least pleasant part, or the most challenging? Maybe none of it is unpleasant, but what you have found takes the most discipline or effort.
I've never had any difficulties doing this. I just loved it from the first time. I said, "No, this is. I really like this." And I remember doing it. We did kind of an all-day reading of my Iliad, complete text, straight through, in a large auditorium. Where was it? University of Virginia, I think. And I did the first book, and I did the last book, and I was the only one using a drum. Everybody else was welcome to use a drum. It was fine.
They left theirs in the car, I guess.
Right, I guess so. Because 22 books of the Iliad were read without a drum. My using a drum really stood out for me, and I guess it did for the audience as well. And I just became more convinced than ever. This is how you do it.
Jeff, you're teaching presently. Maybe that's
I could bring in the drum.
You could bring in like a kettle drum or something, and
well, you could really go wild with drums, I suppose.
If I can ask, a connected question to David's question. You say that nothing about this has been unpleasant for you, but have you found particular authors more difficult to translate than others, or maybe the flip side is, did you have all the works that you've translated, did you have a favorite ancient author that it was more of a joy to translate?
And maybe you want to say, Jeff, and why was that favorite author Ovid?
Why was that favorite author?
And why was Ovid the favorite author? Presuming the answer.
Well, Ovid is very much the poet at play, and you just feel that from the beginning, and so you just have a good time along with the author you're translating, and you know that he'll be a little forgiving too. It's okay, it's good enough, So.
Virgil, I don't think so.
Virgil, no. You're on the spot with Virgil. Homer has a very big mind, and he knows that nobody can come close to what he's doing. So whatever you do, it's okay, my boy. But that's an interesting question. It really is. I never thought of it that way. If you can arrange a reading for me, I'd really appreciate it. Then I'll let you know how it is.
Yeah. Were you ever drawn to doing any Greek tragedy or comedy?
Well, I wasn't drawn to it, but a number of years ago, I was approached by, I can't remember who it was. They were going to do a complete Greek tragedy, or maybe it was just a complete Euripides, there are 19 Euripides plays. And I agreed to do 4. And I did them, and the whole project completely fell apart. I don't know what happened. So there they were. I kind of saw them on my computer maybe a year ago, and wrote my editor at Hackett, would you like to do this? And he said, if you throw in Bacchic women as a fifth. So I went ahead and translated Bacchic women, and he has it all, and he said, this is good, of course. And he cannot find anyone to introduce it who has not already introduced. There's no Euripidean scholar who hasn't already introduced some other translation. And so he doesn't know what to do.
I could fake it. Let's see.
Would you? I'll tell him.
Yeah, Euripides was a Roman. He lived in the 4th century AD.
There you go. You got it. Yeah, you know what you're talking about.
I think he was from North Africa. The rest just writes itself.
It's a strange dialect that he used.
Right. Sign me up. Jeff, anyway, you can write the epilogue.
That's where I am with Euripides.
What were the other 4 that you translated?
There you go. Let's see. Trojan women, Helen. I don't even remember, to tell you the truth. I haven't looked at it for so long. They were good. I liked them all. It was fine. Those are the only 2 that come to mind readily.
So what are you presently working on, if we can ask you?
Well, not only am I not working on anything, I can't foresee anything.
Oh.
Right? And I'm beginning to worry a little. The last thing that I actually did, and I should have put this on the list.
Oh, Tales of Dionysius.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's a big book.
Yeah.
And I co-edited it with Bill Levitan, an old friend from graduate school, Michigan published
I taught with him for a couple of years at Grand Valley.
Oh, did you? Okay,
and,
so you know.
And I believe you know Diane Rayer as well, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Translator
worked
of
with her
Euripides,
as well.
Right?
Yeah,
Yes.
a long time ago. Yeah. Anyway, this is a 6th century AD. It's the last and by far the longest classical poem. It got very good reviews. It just came out about a year ago. So I should have added that to the list.
I think I did see it somewhere, actually. Yeah. So maybe
it got one big review fairly recently, and that you might have seen somewhere. I don't remember. My co-translator for Heroides, Melina McClure, who's a student at Oxford now, and we met when she was in her senior year at USC, and I got a phone call from her father saying, my daughter is brokenhearted that she won't be able to come to your performance. She fell down the stairs and broke her leg. Would you please give her a call? So I gave her a call, and we continued, kind of formed a friendship on the phone, and I began to realize she's extremely talented.
Yeah.
She chose Oxford over Harvard and Yale, that sort of thing.
Who doesn't?
And so asked her if she would like to translate Heroides with me. And I knew I would have to coach her just so she would be in sync with my style and especially my versification. But it turned out well. It turned out real well, I thought, and it's in press now. So, and I don't think I won't be doing anything else with her, I don't think.
So,
but she suggested, again, I don't know at all if I'll do this, Virgil's Georgics and Virgil's Eclogues. Now, Virgil's Eclogues, I understand these 10 pastoral poems. I've done 2 of them, they're unpublished, but I never could get through Virgil's Georgics. The didactic poem on farming, animal husbandry, and beekeeping. And I don't even know half the vocabulary. But my colleague who's writing the introduction for Heroides, Tara Welch, told me it's her favorite classical poem, the Georgics.
I've never heard that.
I'm astounded.
Yeah.
I just don't understand it. But and if I get one more person who says it, maybe I'll be moved to do it anyway. But right now, I'm going to give it a pass, and I may finish the Eclogues, but I'm kind of like, maybe this is it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, with all due respect and sympathy to this wonderful co-scholar of yours and her suffering for falling down the stairs, it occurs to me that this is something I could use pretty well. Send a message to a famous writer and say, I've fallen down the stairs and broke my leg. Please give me a call.
That's what it was. It came from her father, of course.
Do you think that would work, Jeff?
That's not a bad in.
Isn't this how the podcast started?
Exactly.
Jeff, I broke my leg. Let's do a podcast.
Yeah. Well, that's not going to happen again. But I don't know. Maybe I'll do that. I can't. Nothing else to do. I feel very nervous about quitting.
I was going to ask you, what do you mean when you say that? You're not working on anything and it worries you.
I've been working on translation since I did my dissertation. That's when I did. My dissertation was Aratus Phenomena, which is now its 3rd publication. It's North Atlantic, published it in 72 or something, 82. And then Claire Van Vliet did an art edition. I don't know if you know about Claire Van Vliet.
No.
She's in her 90s. She's been publishing art books since the 50s. And a friend of hers did a commentary on Aratus's Phenomena, just the commentary. And she was looking around for a translation, and she found my out-of-print translation and asked if she, could do it. I said, well, of course. And so she did. And so it is a beautiful piece of work. It's about this big. Comes in a beautiful hardwood box, and the art is just terribly impressive and perfectly appropriate for the poem. So that's its second publication. $2,500 a copy, in case you're interested.
Oh my! Is that in the budget, John? I'm not sure that's in the budget.
No, not for us.
Have to break
your
both
library
legs.
may get one for you. So, and now this edition that Chicago is coming out with, which has revised notes and different illustrations and a revised introduction and so forth. So anyway, it's not a screeching halt anyway.
No.
But I'm gradually putting on the brakes and looking around to see if I should finally stop the car.
Sure. Well, Jeff, we should probably be sensitive to Stan's time here and give some of it back to him. Maybe a closing question from each of us.
Sure.
Stan, if you could, speak directly to all those students out there, some of whom listen to us, and they're studying Greek and Latin or the classics and literature more generally, what kind of advice would you give, or what sort of things would you encourage them to focus on?
I would say whatever author you're reading, read it out loud to yourself. Make it come alive. Don't just read it to understand it, but read it to bring it back to life. You will have a much deeper appreciation of the poem, or the prose for that matter. Classical prose is very artistic and crafted, that would be the advice that I would give.
That's excellent.
And don't be discouraged. This stuff is hard for everybody.
Yeah. Jeff, you have a final question for Stan?
I think that's the perfect note to end this on. That was great. I was going to ask a question along similar lines, but I love that.
I scooped you.
Okay.
Yes, you did. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. It's all yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stan, for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I do too. Thank you both so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, Jeff, that wraps it up with Stan. I think we got to get out of here, don't we?
We got to get out of here just because.
What?
I'm hearing some.
Are you hearing
from
some
upstairs.
sounds?
Yes.
People trying to get down into the vomit. Who is that?
I don't know. I believe it's the Sled Poet Society.
What? The Sled Poet Society?
Yeah.
What do they want with this place?
I don't know, but they write verse about winter
Wonderland
conveyance.
Yeah.
Right.
So winter's coming to an end here in Michigan.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
We got to put away the radio flyer.
Yep.
Got to put away the toboggan.
Yes.
What else?
We got. As a kid, you ever use the Ziffy Whomper?
Oh, I did. I had a Ziffy Whomper.
I had a Ziffy Whomper.
The problem is, it would get snow on the inside, and there'd be no Ziff and no Whomp.
No, you just grind to a halt.
Right. Well, you do this long sprinty run, and then whomp onto it,
and then
nothing
just
stuck right there.
Exactly.
Did you ever use the saucer?
I had a good saucer. Yeah.
Did the plastic handles ever stay in for more than one trip?
Never. Right. They break off immediately.
It's like going down the hill in the top of a yogurt container.
Exactly.
Nothing dignified, but sometimes swift.
I'm hoping that the society doesn't hear us talking. They might be offended by this.
Well, I think they'll probably try to enlist us in their Sled Poet Society.
You're much more optimistic than I am.
Verse after verse about lost mittens and frozen tongues on steel surfaces.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it.
I could get into that. But hey, we do got to get out of here. But before we do, Dave, would you tell us a little bit about the Moss Method and LPSI?
Yes. So I want people to read Greek. I want them to become great Greek scholars and maybe even published translators and poets like Stan Lombardo.
Yeah, make it new.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Like Ezra Pound. So how can you do that? We got to learn some Greek. So you go to mossmethod.com, you check out my program. More than 2,060 free online lessons now in both Greek and Latin. And you might think, hey, this is a good deal for me. It is.
Yeah.
It's a great value. 40 lessons in each module with 6 quizzes, 2 exams. And what's your favorite feature, Jeff, on Fridays?
I love the office hours, right? This is where you have students from not just across the state, not across the country, but from around the world.
That's correct.
Coming together and reading Greek.
That's right. You're going to Zoom bomb us one of these times?
I would love to.
All right.
Yeah.
Mossmethod.com. It's $325. You get a year's access. And, you get access to me. You can ask me any question you want about Greek. Don't always have the answer, but I can find it. And I think I have a gift for explaining things clearly.
Indeed
that's
you do.
Really, thank you.
Yes.
I think that's really the strong suit of this particular program.
Yeah. And how about if somebody wanted to learn Latin?
Yeah, I'll be briefer. Go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. I use Hans Orberg's book, Teach You to Speak Latin, Read Latin, Write Latin. Again, it's a great value of a program. Chapters 1 through 9 are already going. Unit 2, chapters 10 through 18 in production.
Fantastic. Excellent. And they can learn with other students, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We also have office hours for Latin, typically on Saturdays.
Excellent.
So there's really no reason not to start your journey into the delights of these languages.
Fantastic.
Jeff, what if they want to get in touch with us? Well, maybe we should give some thanks here.
Yes,
first.
as always, thanks to Mishka, our intrepid engineer, who stitches us together, makes us sound better than we are.
Always a little more challenging when we have a guest.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So we really appreciate the great work that she does. And how about these musicians, Dave?
Oh, incredible.
We got Scott, we got Ken.
Yeah, wheedling arpeggios, the screaming guitar, combining a little bit of the edgy and lively and upbeat, and then a discussion about intellectual things. I think it's the perfect sort of combination.
Indeed. I totally agree. But yeah, so if people want to get in touch with us, you can write to Dave. Just send it to dave@adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V.
Or jeff@adnauseam.com, especially if you want to send him compliments or expressions of gratitude for putting up with me.
I'm very needy. I'm a bottomless pit for validation. So yes, please.
Jeff@adnauseam.com. Do not forget the V. If you want to pick up some merchandise, go to adnauseam.com, our Lurch with Merch section. You can get a hat, a t-shirt, a mug to show that you are taking in the classics.
And keeping them down.
And Jeff, what is on tap for next week?
I think we're back to Mr. Meru, right? Yeah. In our journey through the history of education in antiquity.
Promises to be riveting.
Right. So I think we're going to pick it up. We're still kind of we're in
Plato.
Plato?
That's correct.
Yep.
Along about chapter 6.
Fantastic.
And I think, Jeff, you have the gustatory parting shot today, do you not?
Yeah. So once again, I'm going to one of my favorites of all time, Jack Handy's Deep Thoughts. And he writes, "My favorite uncle was Uncle Caveman. We called him that because he lived in a cave, and every once in a while he'd eat one of us. Later on, we found out he was a bear."
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.